This tiny piece on your guitar does not get the attention it deserves. When your guitar nut isn't right, nothing else matters, period. There are 5 make or break aspects to every nut. When they're right, your guitar sings, but when they're off, you get tuning problems, muted strings, phantom noises. The guitar just doesn't play right, no matter how perfect the rest of your setup is. And this is an issue you will have to deal with at some point. Most nuts from the factory are not dialed in, and even if they are, they don't stay that way forever. So today, with the help of a very special guest, I'm going to take you through these 5 points one by one and show you exactly what you need to know in order to dial your guitar nut in perfectly.
Hello.
Hey Tomo, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
I watched the video you sent me about your noise, and I think I know what's going on.
Hello, Gene. So here's a problem. Frets is good, intonation is great, but open strings, especially first string, second string, it's really muted. And this, it's really muted. This really bugs me. It's not clear. So when I play this, every time it seems like this, This one. See, I want to play this phrase, but it's really muted. So I hope you can figure out for me. What is the problem is causing this,
Yeah, a lot of players experience this, Tomo. And it can be pretty confusing. It's so subtle. You often wonder, am I going crazy? Or is there something really wrong with my guitar? Is this a fret buzz? Well, I can say almost certainly the problem is in your nut.
Oh, yep. Oh, yeah. Okay.
So how about this? I'm going to send you a care package with a little troubleshooting checklist of about 5 different things I want you to look at, and some tools and some supplies you might need. I'll turn you loose on it, and then we'll check back in and see how you did.
That's great. I think, a really great challenge for me to, follow your suggestion, and you can check me out later. That's wonderful.
We'll get it all sorted out.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Tomo. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Gene.
Fixing nut issues isn't difficult. The hard part is diagnosing them. They can be hard to hear or to know exactly where they're coming from. Let's get some better audio so you can really hear what we're talking about. First, a string played cleanly, no issues. Now, the problem string. Hear that? The string doesn't ring clearly, it's muted. Fret the string and it all goes away. It's only the open note. That's your first sign the problem is in the nut. So a lot of muted sounds like drones, open string buzzes, and most tuning issues can be traced back to a nut that is not functioning properly. So let's go through the 5-point checklist so you can evaluate your nut properly. The first thing to check is proper slot width. Each nut slot should closely match the gauge of the string you're using. Here I'm using 10s, probably the most common gauge string for electrics. So that's 10, 13, 17, 26, 36, and 46 thousandths. So I made the nut on this guitar, and I can tell you that the nut slots are just slightly bigger than the strings themselves, which is a good thing. But if it's too wide, the string has too much wiggle room to shift side to side. So you might hear a rattle or even end up with uneven string spacing. If the slot is too narrow, the string can't slide through smoothly when you tune, and it gets hung up inside the slot. Maybe you've experienced this. You keep turning the tuner until the tension finally builds up enough to suddenly break free, and then you often hear a little ping sound. And on top of that, having a narrow nut slot prevents the string from fully seating at the bottom of the slot. When the string isn't making solid contact, it just floats in the slot. That will kill your tone. Open notes sound dead or muted. The first and most important thing I sent Tomo is a set of nut files. These come in a variety of sizes and styles, but I just sent him a regular set of individually gauged standard nut files. That's what I use, and it's what I think works best. Tomo plays 10s, so I sent him an individual file for each gauge of string. Now you may not be able to find an exact match for each gauge of string, and that's okay. If you have to go 1,000th, maybe 2,000ths below, that's not ideal, but it's doable, and I'll show you why in a minute. But anything up to 4,000ths over is no problem at all. Another thing I sent Tomo are these backers. Now on the wider files, they're not quite as necessary, but they're very handy. But on this thin one that's wobbly and paper thin, a backer is really important. So this just slides in here, tighten the screws down, and that gives us a spine, some support to keep this file sturdy and straight. So let's swap this guitar for one that has a good example of a nut with slots that are too narrow. Check out the slots on this Gretsch. My wound strings don't look too bad, but my unwound strings are pinching in the slots. Check this out. I can barely even get this E string out of the slot. So let's run a file through there and see what happens. I'm gonna drop this file down in the slot and just move it through, pulling both directions until it slides easily. That didn't take much. I'm not removing any material. I'm not even creating any dust on top of the guitar. So let's drop that string back in, and that fits much nicer now. So in my instructions to Tomo, I asked him to check the width of his slots by gently sliding the nut files through and making sure there isn't any gunk or debris holding things up. Eventually, we're gonna talk more about the right angle and the height of the cut, but for now, we're simply making sure the width is good and the slots are clean. So don't go too hard yet. The idea isn't to cut the bottom and lower the slot. This is all it takes to ensure the slots are wide enough and clean. Now, if your slots are too wide, in most cases, I recommend just replacing the nut. Let me show you an example. Here's an example of slots that are way too wide. You see this a lot on plastic, cheap nuts from import guitars, or on guitars that are just really old and the nut has been abused and worn out over the years. It's not worth trying to fix this. It's just a better option to replace the entire nut. Check out the B string here. You can see just how much that string moves inside of that slot, and you can even hear a lot of that noise is due to the string just vibrating inside of that slot. This nut needs to go. Now, making a nut from scratch can be a daunting task. There's more to it than you might expect, and we have entire videos dedicated to that process if you're interested. Another good option, if you're new to this, are pre-made nuts. Let me show you something. These are a couple of pre-made options. The TUSQ nuts by Graphtec are a great option. They are the closest to being finished out and require the least amount of work. They're the most beginner friendly if you're new to all of this. They're a good option for a lot of guitars. Now, bone is my favorite material, and we have some semi-machined, pre-slotted bone nuts that are a great place to start if you're up for the challenge. But whatever replacement you choose, make sure you follow along this 5-point checklist to make sure the important details are dialed in and the nut functions properly. Now that we have our slot width worked out, we can move on to our next step, which is adjusting the height over the first fret, and that's controlled by the depth of our slot. Now, this adjustment is part of a much bigger setup picture. It's a delicate balance between your nut height, your neck relief or truss rod, and your bridge saddle height. Each one of these adjustments affects the other, so if one is not right, the other two aren't either. But here's the issue I see all the time, especially on new guitars. The neck relief is okay, the bridge, the saddles are adjusted reasonably well, but the nut is left too high. And that's understandable. Most factory nuts are just in the ballpark. They leave them for the player to dial in later. But that's not something most players understand how to do. Here's the thing, it's not like a truss rod adjustment or a bridge saddle adjustment. It's not even an adjustment, it's a modification. You're actually removing material that you can't easily put back. So you really only get one shot at it, and nut action is like the fingerprint of your setup. It's different for everybody. So where should the string height be over the first fret? Well, to get this right, your neck and your bridge and saddle adjustment has to be correct first. Otherwise, you're just chasing your tail. If you don't know how to do that, no worries. We have a lot of videos that take you through that process step by step on our channel. Check those out before you make any alterations to your nut. In a pro setup, string height off the nut is the very last step. Here's how I determine the proper height. Grab a capo and put it behind the first fret. Now look at the clearance between the string and the second fret. That gap is your reference point. This is basically what we want to see when we remove the capo and check the gap over the first fret. If anything, we'd like to see a little extra room so we can strum open notes harder without getting a buzz. This gap is more than I'm seeing over the second fret. So I'll take a nut file that matches my string gauge and lower my slot a little bit. This is where it gets personal. String gauge, tuning, pick attack, it all plays a major role in what your height over the first fret can be. There's a fine line between low and comfortable and low and buzzy. So file small amounts and pause often to play your guitar like you normally would. The right height is a small target, and you want to sneak up on it slowly. Once you can dig in hard without buzz and the string doesn't feel too stiff when you fret it, you know you're there. And that's usually 1 to 2 times what you see over the 2nd fret when you're capoed at the 1st. So that gives you an idea where your string height should land. But the path your string takes heading toward the nut is equally important. And that brings us to our next step, break angle. When a string leaves the nut and approaches the tuners, it needs to be traveling at a downward angle called the break angle. This delivers proper downward tension on the nut and ensures the string rings clearly. If the angle is too shallow, the string is loose and unstable in the nut, and the resulting vibration creates a muted, drone-like sound that can sound a lot like a sitar. On Gibson-style necks, the peg head is angled back, so you naturally get a good downward tension. But that's not the case on straight peg heads. That's why this problem is more common on Fender-style guitars. It's not usually a problem for the strings closest to the nut because the angle is steep there. But as the tuners move farther away, the angle flattens out and the tension at the nut is reduced. That's why you see string retainers or string trees on Fender-style necks. They pull the far strings down and give you a better break angle. Something I noticed on Tomo's guitar during the Zoom call. He has a spacer underneath his string retainer, just like this guitar. It's pretty common. Sometimes the angle you get with the spacer in place still isn't enough, so you go through all your 5 points of your checklist and you might still get a drone. In a case like that, you need to either trim some height off the spacer or just pull it out entirely to bring the string closer to the peg head and increase the downward tension on the nut. So string break angle is one thing, but the nut slot also needs to be cut with that same break angle. Like I mentioned earlier, a flat nut slot is no good. It focuses the break angle pressure at the back edge instead of spreading it evenly across the bottom of the slot. This creates the opportunity for weird noises, drones, and it can even affect your intonation. So the slot needs to match or slightly exceed the break angle of the string itself. To do this, use your nut files to carefully add the angle, moving from the back of the nut forward. Usually this is part of step 1, when you lower your slots, but not always. If the string is already at the correct height, then the goal is to blend the angle into the front of the slot without lowering the string or removing material from the very front edge. So this is kind of difficult on a Fender-style guitar. This is way easier on Gibsons or Martins or any sort of a guitar with a peg head angle and a much wider nut. You have a lot more room to work. The peg head isn't in your way. You have all of this clearance. It's way easier. On a Fender, you've only got 1/8 of an inch of surface, and I'm trying to just barely hit that back edge without touching the front edge if I don't need to lower the slot. So take your time, go slow, work the back edge of the nut, keep the file at an angle greater than the string so that you're just hitting the back edge and you're staying off the front. Being careful not to hit the neck, put a piece of tape back there to protect the finish. Just go slow, remove small amounts of material, and check often. Filing your nut is a game of thousands. It's very easy to go just a little too far, and then you end up with a string that's too low and you get a 1st fret buzz. So instead of replacing the nut, let me show you a cool trick for how to fill the slot and recut it. The traditional old school trick for this is to use some super glue and some baking soda or some bone dust and pack the slot full of the dust and then bleed in some super glue and let it all solidify and then recut the slot. I've tried all of that. It's problematic at best, I think. It's temporary, and it almost always gives you binding problems. It makes the string sticky within the slot. You get your height back in exchange for some other issues. This is Nut Rescue Powder. This was created by Joe Glazier in his guitar shop in Nashville. Joe's patented this stuff. I don't even know what's in it, but it works great. It's no baking soda hack. This stuff dries harder, it lasts longer, and it's self-lubricating, so it avoids all the problems that I hated. This is the only product I'll use to fill and recut a nut slot. Shout out to Joe for inventing a product that we all really need. Okay, let me show you how this is done. First, I'm gonna get a piece of tape in front of the nut to protect the fingerboard. We'll do our treble E string here that I just recut. Like to clean out the slot, make sure there's nothing in there. Then I'm gonna take a little bit of my Nut Rescue powder. This comes with a tiny little spoon for dishing a little bit of this out, and that works great. What I like to use is a glue looper. What this is gonna allow me to do is apply this glue 1 drop at a time. It doesn't take much. I'm gonna take the looper and I'm just gonna touch it to the powder and it's gonna wick right where I need it to go. Okay. I take a Q-tip, make sure I don't have any on the top of the nut where I don't want it. I'm gonna take a little bit of Accelerator, the brush-on kind, because I don't want to just spray it everywhere, and that glue will dry instantly. That's it, it's dry already. The last thing I'm gonna do is take an extra fine nut shaping file and just trim off the top flush with the rest of the nut, and just like that, I get a second chance at cutting a new nut slot. The fourth thing we need to consider is the depth of the string inside the nut. If we had to lower our string and cut the slot deeper, we may have buried the string underneath the surface of the nut. What I'm shooting for is about half the diameter of the wound strings sticking out above the top of the nut, and to just feel the tops of the unwound strings. I want those buried a little bit further so they stay in place during aggressive bends. If you're already at this stage after all of this work, you can just skip this step. Let's look at an example where the strings are buried way too far in the nut. I have the perfect strap for that one too. Look how deep these strings are buried inside of this nut and all of this excess material we don't need above the top of the string. The reason we don't want this is because it's not doing us any good. It's not helping the string stay in place, and that much excess material can cause binding issues, which will give us tuning problems, and the string can actually hang up in the slot and not ring clearly. Not to mention is it just doesn't look very good. Now, one thing to keep in mind, if you have a really cheap plastic nut, a really inexpensive import guitar, don't even bother with this. It's not worth it. Just replace the nut. It doesn't have to be bone, but if it's the softest, cheapest plastic, it's just not worth your time, and it's not gonna shape out right or look very good. Just replace that nut. This one we can reshape. So let's remove all this material we don't need. It's important to tape off for this. We're going to use a nut and saddle shaping file to remove excess material above the strings, and you don't want to risk hitting the finish or the fretboard. I file until I start to hit the top of the strings. You're going to have to sacrifice a set of strings for this part, so don't change your strings first. Once I can see I've begun to hit the top of the strings, I loosen them a bit and pull them aside. Then I keep going on the wound string slots a little more since I want more of those strings exposed. And then I blend that into the treble side of the nut. Check again with the strings and adjust until you're close. Be careful to leave a little more material than you actually need for the final sanding and polishing steps later, so you don't go past your mark. Switch to a finer cut on this file and blend all this into the rough shape so I don't have any sharp edges or corners and my deepest scratches start to come out. We'll polish this out and finish shaping it during our last step of the nut setup, dressing the slot. Okay, even though this is the last step, it is critical for the proper functioning of your nut. Even if you got every other step perfect up to this point, if you skip this stage or get it wrong, you could still be getting a weird noise coming from your nut, and you're definitely setting yourself up for tuning issues. So what do I mean by dress? Two things. First, your slot needs to funnel out in the back of the nut. This guides your string into place and directs it where it needs to go. Think of the string like a car heading down the highway. When you come to an exit, it doesn't just brake right hard. There's an on-ramp to guide you into place gently. We need to do the same thing with our nut slots. And second, we need to smooth any sharp corners that are left over. The objective is to end up with a properly sized slot that works with the angle of the string, allowing it to lead cleanly from the front edge without binding. This also allows the string to ring clearly, intonate properly, and helps to deliver smooth, effortless tuning. We're going to stick with this same guitar and finish out this nut, and I'm going to show you how I like to dress the slots. Let's start with the bass E string here. I'm going to use a 46 thousandths nut file, matches the gauge of my string, and we're going to start on the back edge. These corners, since we filed our slots and we've cleaned off the top, are very sharp. And this is also the reason why I wanted to remove all of this excess material. I want to come in and hit these sharp edges on the back of my slot. If I had all that excess material sitting clear above here, I could dress that all day and it doesn't matter because the string is buried clear to the bottom. So you don't want all that excess material, it gets in the way and it prevents you from dressing the slot out properly. On a Fender, I don't have a lot of room to work. I'm just going to tilt the file and concentrate short strokes on the back corners just to round those off a little bit. I'm coming in at an angle almost like the back of my funnel. And I'm going to roll that all the way through the slot, clear to the other side. It's also helpful to come at a very steep angle and just get bottom of the slot to get that nice round over ramp leading into the slot. And you repeat that for all of these strings, and it gets more difficult as you get down to the unwound strings because there's not a lot there. But you still just want to come in and make sure there's no sharp corners. Then the last thing I want to do is come through and really smooth all of that out. And to do that, I've sent Tomo some toll cut sandpapers from Eagle Abrasives. They come in high grits starting at 800, but they cut like lower grits. They just leave a really fine finish, and they're great for doing stuff like this. I can fold this over and it sticks on itself, and I can come back and polish out that slot really nice. And I'll even hit the front edge a little bit. I don't want to widen it out like I did in the back, but I want to make sure that I don't have any sharp corners that are going to impede the movement of the string. You can go up in a couple of grits and then work my way through. When I get to the unwound strings, it gets a little more difficult to fold it and fit in there, so you kind of have to work side to side, flipping the paper around. And I'm also going to clean up the top that I reshaped with my file, make sure there's no file marks in there and everything blends real smoothly and looks clean. Just move through a few higher grits to make sure it's polished out and shiny. This is also a good time to mention that in the beginning of the video, when we were choosing our file sizes, I mentioned that if the closest you can get to your string is 1,000th, maybe 2,000ths under, that will work even though it's not ideal. First of all, because you're cutting a slot by hand, so it's gonna be a little bigger than the gauge listed on the file just because of the inaccuracy of hand cutting a slot. Furthermore, you're coming in with these sandpapers at the end to smooth everything out. You're gonna lose 1,000th or two on the width, and that's gonna allow the string to really seat and slide through smoothly. Final thing I do to it is just polish it out. You can take some polishing cloth, a little bit of soft leather or chamois just by hand, and the friction alone will polish it up. But you can get a little fancier if you want and use a little fine buffing compound to get a good shine. And this will look beautiful. So while you're doing this, you're gonna get some gunk in the slot. Make sure that's cleaned out. You can use your nut files or a brush. It's not a big deal, just pick it out of there. Let's see what it looks like. If you get to this stage and you're tuning up and you hear a ping, you did something wrong. We'll leave the last string off here so you can see the back that I funneled out and softened and cleaned up. And you can see I've got tops of my strings exposed. This looks great, way better than what we started with. These strings are gonna move through here easily and not cause any tuning issues, and they're gonna ring clearly, and the height above the first fret is gonna be perfect. And our last string, beautiful. Okay, that does it. Those are our 5 points. Let's check in with Tomo and see how he did. Tomo!
Hi.
How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great.
Good. So how did it go for you?
Yeah, it's really good. I mean, much clearer. Everything I play.
That sounds a lot better.
Yes, much better, yes.
So what did you have to do to it? Did you go through each one of the 5 steps I sent you?
Yeah, so the first I used a file that matched with my high E string.
Okay.
And then I made a little smooth. And
Okay.
after that, I used the sandpaper and just, I made a slot a little bit more wider and smoother. And after that, it's not
Good.
muted anymore. That was amazing, yeah.
Well, I think it's just because you're such a dynamic player and the way you play, and you press a lot behind the note.
Yeah, I bend a lot in a high, like that, I use that.
Yeah.
And then I think, it's been like, 4 or 5 years after the, new nut was built. So I think kind of wore out while I'm playing.
I think that might happen again too, it's just,
yes, exactly.
yeah.
And then funny part is, I really surprised that I can really do this by myself because I was a little afraid there's something wrong. But, your guidance was really clear that I only do a few times with the, tool.
Well, we did the same thing here. And I kind of recreated your noise, and we went through it in detail how I fixed it.
Guidelines really important for as a guitar player because sometimes like in guitar player we play by feeling, but also danger of fixing something we use a feeling to fix it, right? And sometimes go beyond, so that was a guideline really helped me.
Tomo, I'm so happy it worked out for you. Now you have all the tools, and this has been great. Thank you so much for
it has been great. Thanks so much, Jim, for helping me through this. Maybe I hope I have more problems so I can use these tools again.
I bet you will.
Yeah, all right.
And you're getting ready to go back to Japan soon, right?
Yes.
You
Yeah,
said?
next year.
And
Yes.
you
Yeah.
have a new book out.
Right, Guitar Wisdom, right. It's in
Tell us
all
about it.
English. Yeah, this is more like a little bit more philosophy, one finger, one string approach. Then I introduce triads, chords, rhythm, tapping. It's really different from regular guitar method book.
I can't wait to check it out. Until next time, huh?
Yeah.
We'll do this again.
Yeah, I will call you again.
Thank you so much, Tomo.
Thank you, Gene.
All right.
See you soon.
There we have it. That was a success. Tomo had a small fix that made a huge change in the way his nut worked. So now you have the 5 steps that you need to know in order to make sure that the nut on your guitar always functions properly. Tomo didn't even need all 5. He needed the first one and the last one. But it's good to know them all because you never know when they're going to come in handy. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you at the bench next time.